Hello and welcome to JTV Instagram Live Short, my new series featuring book authors, speakers, coaches, consultants, and small business owners. I'm your host, Janette Burke. Today, I'm joined by Danielle Savory, who is Pleasure Printable. And she is here to talk to us about why women tend to neglect the pleasure of sexual pleasure in their life. They avoid it, they neglect it, and it causes all kinds of havoc. So please welcome now Danielle. Danielle, how are you today?
Good. How are you? I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Now, Danielle, you're an expert on this topic. Women tend to ignore this. It causes all kinds of havoc in their life. Let's hear a little bit about what it does cause when you ignore sexual pleasure, which you say is a divine right in every woman's life. Why is it a divine right? What happens when we ignore it? Not just to our body, but just in general, what happens in our lives? And how can we correct it when it's put back in?
Yeah. Well, I think that, it doesn't happen intentionally. And I think that's the first thing that a lot of women think. There can even be a shame associated with not tapping into their sexual pleasure or not tapping into their pleasure in general. And, I think first it's really important for us to understand as women, we're not doing this intentionally. We're not going out and being like, oh, I want to cut this part of my body off. And usually it tends to happen over time, especially if you find yourself in long-term relationships where maybe it was like hot and heavy at the beginning and you're dating and there's so much chemistry, and then life goes on and maybe you move in together and it gets a little bit less, and then maybe you get married or maybe you have children and it gets less and less and less over the years. And the way that society presents this is that's normal, that is the thing that should happen, especially in these long-term monogamous relationships, is that we should just stop caring. And I think the thing is we do have to remember that we are wired in brain and body for so much pleasure, and we get disconnected for a number of different reasons. Part of it is just the way that society has presented sexuality, which is through the lens of male pleasure. And when we're always looking at sex through the lens of male pleasure, it really doesn't make it seem like it is ever for us, that there is a benefit for us. Even when you talk to a lot of women that are in these long-term relationships, they might say something like, oh yeah, I haven't given it to him for a while. Or when they are, initiated by their partner, it's something, one more thing I have to do for someone else, one more thing I have to give to someone else. And when we start to just understand that, like, this isn't something we're giving, like even the idea of like when we're like giving someone virginity or giving away something, it makes it sound like it literally is a piece of us that we're giving away versus something that we get to receive, something that we get to benefit from, not just from, the intimacy and the experience with the person, but from a psychological experience, from a physiological experience. There's so much more that can happen when we allow ourselves to, number one, just be connected to our body in a sensual way, sexual or not, but then being able to give ourselves permission to receive, to let ourselves to soak it in, the way that it optimizes our brain and boost our immune system. There's so many of those benefits, but I think for women too, it's just claiming this part of us. It's like there's so much disconnect that happens between us and our body when we're living so up here. It's like our to-do list and what's next and mental load and emotional load. There's so much there that we're taking on.
So what can we do to combat it? Because you're identifying the problems, you're also identifying, the benefits or what happens when you don't, but you're not really, I need to hear more about, and I think the audience would like to hear more about, what can we do to integrate it into our life and how is that beneficial?
Yeah, well, I think that the integration into your life, I mean, the first part is connecting with your body. We need to be able to connect to our body, which sounds, just like, oh, what does that mean, connecting to our body? But actually dropping out of the thinking part of our brain and connecting to our body, not just, eating a meal and not even tasting it. There's small things that we can start to do to like bring our presence back into our body. Like when you're feeling something like a big emotion or something that's really stressful in our life, like allowing ourselves to lean into the experience that's happening in the body. So if it's a challenge or stress, like, oh, what am I feeling? Like, oh, woman, you're like really stressed right now. Let me take some deep breaths. Let me actually feel and process this. By bringing in sensuality and sexuality, we give ourselves permission to be in our body. So what we start to do is we start by just being in our body in general, and then we can start to be in our body in a sensual way, in a pleasurable way. But it's the courage and the willingness to be in our body, because the brain wants to resist it. The brain would rather have us just spinning and staying up here and thinking and, just worrying and stressing and anxiety and all of these things. But when we actually just slow down, when we give ourselves permission, when we start to feel like, what's here? What does this feel like? How do I know I'm stressed? How can I like take care of that? Just
What
that
is one
alone.
thing you could do in a day? Because what I'm hearing from you say is that taking care of this and bringing sexual pleasure to your life as a divine right as a woman will bring benefits tenfold, from your health to making you less stressed, to more connected in your relationships, maybe even more focused in your job. But what is one little piece of it? So how somebody who's been completely turned off from their
Yeah.
sexual desire or needs, who isn't incorporating this, who's a busy gal
Yeah.
doing 50 million different things at once, whether it's a job, running a business, trying to run a household, a wife, duties with being part of the sandwich generation and having to take care of elders and so on and so forth, that a lot of responsibility that falls on women, that makes them detract or detach themselves from these needs, and possibly even detract from this long-term relationship they're in, to the point where they're either on the verge of divorce or in divorce,
Yeah.
um, or out cheating, either side. So what is one thing that you could tell my audience today, which is mainly consisting of women 35 to 55 years old?
Yeah.
Maybe they're not comfortable with this because maybe they come from what you said, a generation where, they've been told to put their needs aside and everybody
Yeah.
else's needs come first. What could they do, just one practice a day, to get more connected to themselves, to
Yeah.
integrate the sexual pleasure, and how would it really change their life?
Yeah, I would say if you were going to start with one practice a day, taking aside the interaction with like the partner, because if you're on the brink of divorce and everything else, there's a lot of like that's a big
It's
question
too
and a
late.
big
Yeah, it's
practice
too
to
late.
say like I can tell you one practice for that, because I have no idea what's going on in that relationship. But with yourself and getting comfortable with yourself and with your sensuality and sexuality, I like to do what this thing that I call savory starters, which is just like time in the morning you're already spending. So you're not adding anything extra. You're not making an extra practice, but the
Mm-hmm.
intention is to be in your body. So let's say that you shower in the morning, or maybe you have a facial routine in the morning, to be really present for it and allow yourself to receive it. So it's like when you go to the salon and somebody washes your hair, we give ourselves like the time to just luxuriate. It's like the herbal essence commercials where you're just like, and you're just feeling so good, right? With the shampoo and the smell. Like, take the time, like, smell the shampoo before you put it in your hair. Put it in your hair and like feel your fingers on your scalp. Like, notice the sensation. Be curious what's there. Touch the rest of your body when you're washing yourself or putting lotion on. But there is a difference between just going through the motions, which we do every single day, and being present for them, but also with this tone or this lens of like, like this is for me. Like this feels so good. Like I'm taking care of myself and I'm really absorbing it. That's the best way to, number one, opening up your senses and your sensuality, but start to practice receiving and receiving touch, smell, all of these beautiful things that can lead to pleasure.
Now, Danielle, you teach courses on this very topic,
Yes.
and you're a speaker. You also run a podcast. You have books. Where can we go to learn more and and participate in your wealth of offerings?
Yeah. So the best place just to connect with me personally is on Instagram. It's at the practice of pleasure. The other place is just going to my website. I have a free course that's actually a little bit more extensive of the practice I just said called Savory
Mm.
Starter. And that's just daniellesavory.com/savory starter. And it will be it's an ebook that you can read that can really help you get into the practice of sensuality, but also this permission for pleasure.
Okay, so all those links will be in the show notes as well as mentioned here. So if you missed it, you'll find it there. And I want to thank you so much for taking this time to speak with me today. I want to thank my audience for joining, and I'm going to remind you to continue to watch this new live series I started, JTV Instagram Live. You will find the link to do so. It's also an Instagram link. It will be in the show notes, and we look forward to having you back. We hope you have a great rest of the day, and thank you so much for coming in and spending your time with us. This is Janette Burke, your host, signing off for now.